Thank you for watching this program brought to you by the Orthochat. Before we begin, please take some time to hear some information about our sponsors. Here at the Orthochat, we are proud to be an official partner of Lore Coffee Roasters, an Orthodox Christian coffee company out of Bonners Ferry, Idaho. If you visit their website at www.lorecoffeeroasters.com/theorthochat, we will receive 15% of your order. It's an Orthodox Christian coffee company that is organically sourcing a great variety of flavors. I drink it myself and I love coffee. And as a coffee connoisseur, I can tell you it's top notch. So visit their website at www.lorecoffeeroasters.com/theorthochat for 15% of your purchase to be contributed to our project. Here at the Orthochat, we are proud to be a partner of Scriptorum Press, a Christian publishing company that puts out great books about the lives of the saints, their teachings, and a variety of other Christian topics. My personal favorite in their collection is The Life of St. Dionysius the Areopagite. If you visit their website at scriptorumpress.ca and use the code ORTHOCHAT at checkout, you will receive 15% off of your order, and I encourage you all to check it out to pick up some great patristic and theological teachings, as well as hagiographies to spiritually enrich you and help support the Orthochat and another great Christian company. We here at the Orthochat are proud to be a partner of the St. Maximus Society, run by Archimandrite Maximus Waymore and his collective. They put out great videos talking about the spiritual life, theology, and a variety of other Orthodox Christian topics. If you check out the link below this video, you could find their YouTube channel, and it's currently a growing project, and I implore you all to visit their site so that you can help support them and a great cause for the Orthodox Christian Church. Here at the Orthochat, we support the special needs, differently abled, and their families. That's why we are a proud sponsor of TP Splash Guard, a urinary assistance device for those who need some help during bathroom time. All you need to do is remove the holding seal with instructions on the front, open it up, remove the adhesive to attach it to the front of the toilet, and now it's easier in the restroom. If you would like to learn more about this revolutionary device for special needs and differently abled people, visit tpsplash.com. That's tpsplash.com to learn more and inquire about making a purchase. All statements and opinions expressed by guests of this podcast are not representative of the Orthochat, its host, or its producers, and should not be associated with the podcast unless explicitly stated by the host.
You are listening to the Orthochat by Yanni Katsadas.
Kyrie Iisus Χριστέ ελέησον, 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 Kyrie Iisus Χριστέ ελέησον. Greetings in Christ, brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 70 of the Orthochat. We are here today with Father Theodore Lyketsos. Father, how are you?
Well, thank you. How are you? Blessed feast.
Blessed feast. Father, would you like to start us off with a prayer?
Yeah, sure. Let's sing Napolitikon of the Annunciation, if you don't mind. Pardon my bad singing voice, but it's good we honor the feast. Σήμερον της σωτηρίας ημών το κεφάλαιον και του απέωνος μυστηρίου η φανέρωσης, ο Υιός του Θεού, Υιός της Παρθένου γίνεται και Γαβρίλ την χάριν ευαγγελίζεται, διό και ημείς ειν αυτό τη Θεοτόκο βοήσομεν, χαίρε και χαριτωμένοι, ο Κύριος μετά σου. Christ our God, we ask you to be with us, open our hearts, and reveal to us what you would like us to say today, for your glory and for the benefit of your church. Amen.
Amen. Υπεραδεία Θεοτόκος ως όνομα. Bade, what's going on? Give me the good news. What's up? It's Greek Independence Day. What's new in your life?
Oh, life is good. Things are just, I have no particular news to talk about. I'd say things are going very well at my parish. We're just chugging along, enjoying the services in Lent, just trying to, stay grounded and keep focused on Christ, and nothing in particular to report, I would say.
That's good because, especially with all the heat that comes with Lent, spiritual and administratively, it's good to hear that somebody has it stable, thank God. So, um but yeah, no, I think we should go from the very beginning. So, tell me about your young life and what about it made you care about God and orthodoxy in the church.
Yeah, thank you. Was raised in a Greek American household. So my father's from Athens, my mother's an American. And we were, I don't know, lukewarm believers growing up. We believed in God. I was baptized, as an Orthodox Christian when I was less than a year old or so. And we, prayed before meals often. Went to church, I guess, on a sort of sporadic basis. Catholic church mostly, actually. My mom was Catholic. I spent more time at a Catholic church, but we'd always go to Orthodox church on Pascha. That was my exposure to Orthodoxy. And so I always had a sense of I believe in God. That's, part of who I am, and that was important to me. But I wasn't, super actively religious. Certainly was never an altar boy or anything like that. Didn't grow up participating in the sacraments, or so on and so forth. But I had a sense of myself as a Christian, as an Orthodox Christian, as a believer in God, and that mattered. And I would say my first um, like a big noteworthy part of me developing a religious consciousness, I guess. I was in high school around 2007, 2008. You had this interesting phenomenon coming on the scene called the New Atheism. So you had this. I don't know. I don't know. How old are you?
I'm 25. I remember at least, the fall off from it, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you were probably a bit younger, maybe not as aware, but Richard Dawkins published this famous. He was a biologist, published this famous book called The God Delusion, and it was just very popular to talk about atheism, to deny the existence of God, and that had penetrated even when I was in high school, some of my social circles, and I remember just feeling. I don't know what the right word is, but I really, really resented that. And it was really bad, but it caused me all kinds of doubts and all kinds of internal struggle. People would say all kinds of things, and people would say a lot of stupid myths. Oh, there was never Jesus Christ. He was never, he was based on Osiris or Horus or some, stupid nonsense that turned out later to be entirely fraudulent. But when you're in high school, you don't, you don't necessarily know that. And so I was bombarded with this messaging, oh, God doesn't exist, some this and that. So even though that was a negative way, that was the first time in my life I was maybe even late middle school, early high school. I was coming in front of being confronted with the idea of God and his significance and is there a God or is there not a God and understanding that this was a very critical and crucial question to answer for my personal life. It was not something I could take passively, and I had to be something I had to investigate, something I had to think about, something I had to work through. So that was significant to me. I'm really grateful for my parents that even though we weren't religious that much growing up. They always were very like you know there's a God, there's an afterlife. They tried to support me in whatever way they could. My dad's a scientist, and he got me some. My parents got me some books trying to reconcile science and religion, and those were very influential on me. Those were very important to me, just kind of developing my view of the world. So I would say in high school, and it was because of the new atheism that I started to like really take my religion seriously, to think about it, to engage with it, because it forced me to, even if it was in this negative way. Um, and so that was when in high school was when I started to maybe become self-consciously a Christian, but still wasn't going to church or anything like that. It just wasn't, it was a purely like intellectual, mental thing for me. And I wasn't living a Christian life either, much to my shame. But I was believing that God exists and trying to take that seriously.
Right. And was there any priests, or I mean, obviously, you kind of said your parents, anybody that you were talking to during this time period about, whatever doubts you had, and then just to try to help you through it. And also, what was like that atmosphere like? What are you talking about? You're talking about like high school kids, talking about this, or middle school, whatever age you were at that point, talking about like the acceptance of atheism because of Dawkins' book. I mean, like, how did that even, because you don't hear theological anything like in schools now. I don't
Right.
think people even think about God as much as they used to 15 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know how much or how little people are talking about God now, but I just have this memory of
Well, young people primarily, it's like
yeah,
younger, yeah.
yeah. I have just this memory of some of my friends, and this, this probably didn't characterize most of my childhood, but it was just like something that stuck. I do remember like being made fun of by my friends for believing in God, or people just telling me just how stupid it was and how, most of the Bible's made up. And I just, I've forgotten so much of high school, but that sticks with me because it just really stung and really upset me and really, um, mixed up my internal world. So I do, I just remember that. I remember, my friends and I would watch South Park, which I wouldn't recommend for allowing high school kids to do that. But
Yeah.
there was a lot of making fun of God in that, and a lot of atheism in that, and that was like, I think how it like maybe penetrated my friend group or how we became aware of it. And so I just remember just a lot of internal anguish. I mean, maybe on the surface of it, among kids, it was more maybe perceived as more lighthearted or not super serious. But me internally, it was really like, oh my gosh, maybe my life has no meaning. Maybe I'm not here for any kind of purpose. Maybe when I die, it just goes black, and that was just, oh gosh, that's a terrible thing to think about.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is because I remember around that time, what was I? I mean, my age goes by the year. I'm 25 in 2025, so it's like around that time. I remember I was a little kid, going through like the Joy stuff, like Cam Nazareth Joy, like whatever, like pre-Goya, like kind of church programs, and I always heard this like same rhetoric repeated about, hey, listen, kids, it's okay to do your cross before you eat at the lunch table at school. And not to be embarrassed by it. And I was like, well, me personally, I grew up around a lot of Greeks. Like I grew up around a lot of Greeks that were my cousins and my family friends and stuff like that. So, I in the back of my head I was like, I never had that problem. Who's going through this? But I guess in like places where there wasn't so much like, I guess general I guess denseness of our people around there, I could see how that might have been an issue. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that it's an interesting thought. I think it just what you're saying reminds me of the fact that I was one time when I was going through this period of my life, my mom, with the best of intentions, it brought me to a Catholic youth group. I think I attended like one time, and what I do remember taking away is like I was having all these struggles and anguish about the existence of God or heaven or is the Bible true, and that's just not what anyone was talking about at all. I can't remember what it was about, but I just remember thinking it was just completely irrelevant to my spiritual concerns, and it didn't help me in any way. Anyhow.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So during this period, when did you have maybe your first calling to the priesthood, and what did that feel like?
Um, yeah, I would say that really began when I was in college. Again, I wasn't really involved in the Orthodox Church. Things like priests and weren't really on my mind. I was reading like Christian books in high school, in college, but they were like I didn't differentiate. I was reading, like Catholic and evangelical stuff. I didn't even know there was a difference. Um, it was when I got to college and I happened to major in Russian because I had started studying the Russian language when I was in high school. That I came sort of a roundabout way, even though, I'm totally Greek ethnically, came to the Orthodox Church and the depth and the richness of it. And it was through one of my professors, actually, Matsushka Olga Mirsin. So one of my Russian language professors was a Matsushka, was a priest's wife in the Russian Orthodox Church, and she actually exposed me for the first time when I was around 19 to the idea that actually the answers to some of the stuff I'm looking for are in the Orthodox Church. And so that was how I ended up discovering Orthodoxy. So in that way, I'm kind of like a convert. I feel like it definitely came not from my like childhood or my cultural milieu growing up. It was from an outside source that I came into the faith of my heritage,
Right.
and I was really enamored of. I started getting really into the modern saints and elders, so like Saint Paisios, Saint Porphyrios, and I had an interesting. I started getting involved in the Orthodox Christian Fellowship, and Metropolitan Jonah Paffhausen was actually the primate of the OCA at that time, and he came to talk to our fellowship, and he told us about some encounters he had with some like really holy people. I forget where, just some miraculous experiences he had, and that's when I kind of like glommed onto it. I said, "Wow, if this is real," because that's what I was looking for. I was looking for something like real that actually existed. Like I was agonizing over these religious questions, but like for me, it didn't really work when it was just. I mean, I was interested in like the abstract, high-minded, theological, philosophical stuff, the arguments for the existence of God. That all has its place and had its relevance for me. But what really grabbed me was like the ascetic tradition, the spiritual tradition. It's like, oh, there's substance to this. There's a reality here that I can engage
It's
with.
it's
And
it's the only other religion that works except for like, Wiccan occultism.
yeah, I mean, I would say
What I,
I
what
would.
I mean is like you do something and something actually happens, which I don't think that's any other religion except for the Orthodox Church and like, people that are actually involved with demons, but it's like the other side of the fence that'll condemn you, so.
Yeah, I would actually say yeah, it's the my own belief is that it's the West that's uniquely lacking that. Like I never perceived that in Catholicism growing up. I don't perceive it in Protestant, and I don't mean to characterize these traditions wrongly. Maybe there's something I'm not getting. But I actually think a lot of traditions have substance in terms of experience. That's why people turn to Hinduism, Buddhism. But you're right. I think very often that's getting mixed up with demons.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
St. Paisios, the guru, the young male Elder Paisios, that famous
so
book, that was the kicker for me to enter deeper into Orthodoxy when I was a young kid.
Yeah, that's a really good book, and it, I've encountered it relatively early in my journey as well.
Yeah, it's killer. The guy that wrote it's a professor. Well, he was a professor and an iconographer down in Thessaloniki. He's a little bit older now, but yeah, that I mean it's eye-opening because I think we're seeing more of it now. I think people are trying to look for something with some meat on the bone, so to speak. And I articulate this maybe a little bit brashly, but I kind of call it the ceiling of potentia, so to speak, where it's like, okay, show me like the ideal Protestant. Like show me not like in the quality of who they are, because I mean God loves all of us. It's not like a thing, but it's a matter of, what does the best Protestant do every single day of their life to be the best Protestant, right? And it's read your Bible, it's proselytize, it's be evangelical and tell people about the good word and show up and hear scripture in a church. And then for the Catholics it's maybe a little bit more where they have concept of sacramentology, but in Orthodoxy we have people who articulate and practice their faith through like people being like monastics in the world, people who are like fools for Christ, people who do service work for the needy. And it's like, you see the so many different ways that you can be saintly and how unobtainable like the end of it is. And our religion is endless, but everything we do also comes with a kind of catharsis where God is pleased with us and we feel kind of a finality even in its endlessness. We feel complete and fulfilled within Christ, which I think is something people are begging for without actually knowing what to ask in a funny way.
Yeah, I would definitely agree to all those statements. The saints are the ones you have to look to with regards to orthodoxy. Absolutely, when you realize that people like Saint Paisios, Saint Porphyrios actually existed and walked this earth within living memory, and that they were so completely transformed and penetrated by God's grace that there's really no other option.
Yeah, I agree completely. So tell me about your time in seminary and some of the experiences there that still stick with you positively.
Sure. Um, so. seminary. I went to Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology. I went to an ordinary, just mainstream American undergrad for 4 years, and then went straight into Holy Cross. And let's see, I told you I came to the faith in this sort of negative way through this kind of darkness, finding a positive dimension in Orthodoxy. And then, like, right before I started, like the summer before I was going to start seminary, I regressed completely. And I
Mm.
had this like, personal crisis of faith and was really kind of falling apart to the point I wasn't even like sure I was going to end up at seminary. Wasn't even sure,
Well, that
you know,
happened because you were going to seminary. That's the then
Oh,
part. So,
absolutely, absolutely. Hindsight's 2020, right? But at the time, it was just uh, I was totally my world was my internal world was turned upside down, and I just remember, one distinct memory of that. Was when we were in chant class for the first time. I was learning how to chant one of my first days there, and we're going over the whole class chants these hymns, and I just had this like most disgusted feeling in myself. I said, what am I doing with my life? I'm learning how to sing to God. Like, who is God anyway? What a stupid career move. And that moment stands out to me. I was so, all of a sudden, I was like taken out of myself, not in like some metaphysical sense, but I was just like, all of a sudden, everything seemed so weird and pointless and stupid. And anyway, these were the kinds of feelings, kind of experiences I was having towards the beginning
man,
of my.
it's the spirit of the age. It's just there's so much noise and things in the environment that are like pulling us into that, you know? It's like,
Oh, sure. Yeah. And it was definitely spiritual, but at the time I didn't even know, have a deep concept of what does spiritual mean anyway. But these were the kinds of experiences I was having. These were the kinds of doubts. These were the kind of crises of faith I was having. I was just using that as one example. And then I remember, and there was another thing. Right when I started seminary, there was a big scandal erupted where a well-known priest was discovered to have a mistress, and it blew up everywhere. And that was another thing. It was even in the secular media. It was such a big news, and it just that also disturbed me very deeply. Obviously, if I'm going to be committing my life to the church, like who are these people? What is going on?
I remember that.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it was really unfortunate in retrospect. Just terrible, terrible. Um, but and then in the midst of all that, I one of my first days at seminary, I met a seminarian. And his first question to me is why do you believe in God? And it stung me because that's exactly what I was wrestling with. And I don't know, I don't remember what I answered. I gave him some answer. It probably was kind of weak. And then he told me, like, even worse. He's like, well, I lost my faith in God here at seminary. I'm an atheist now. I no longer believe. And I'm like, whoa. And that, kind of sent me for a loop because it's like, if he's, been here this whole time and he's lost his faith, what's going to happen to me? And then we continued talking, him and I. And then he starts talking about these miraculous experiences he's had. And he talks about one time when he was in front of he was alone in a room with a famous mirror streaming icon with just him and his mom. While they were praying just alone, the icon just starts streaming mirth before their eyes, and I was like, "Whoa!" And he's
Hmm.
like, "Yeah, I can't explain it, but I still don't believe." And then he told me one other miraculous experience he had. For the life of me, I can't remember what that experience was, but I remember he told me two miraculous experiences that were really like rather evidently supernatural. And he's like, and he almost had like a pride, like, "Yes, but I don't believe in them. I'm an atheist." And
Well,
it was
what sent Satan to hell out of paradise? It was that. It's that scratch every sin, and at the core you'll find pride. That's always the.
Right. Right. So this was one of the most bizarre conversations I've had in my life because on the one hand, it was like challenging me and it was like sticking fingers into my open wound at the time that was like really making me wrestle with this difficult stuff. But it was also like weirdly strengthening my faith and building me up because it was like, oh, actually, God is real and he's acted in this person's life, but he himself seems to refuse to believe it. Now, later, that guy had a tumultuous thing. He no longer was an atheist. He went back and forth. I think, to be honest, what started to come out is he wanted to live a life that was very much at odds with sort of what the church teaches, and I think that's kind of what motivated him to reject things. I don't know where he is now. He certainly didn't end up becoming a priest or anything. So I pray for.
Send me his name, and I'll put him in some monasteries, liturgy
Yeah,
preparations.
absolutely, I will do that. But it was that stood out to me because it was like it was right at the beginning of seminary when I was having all these crises, and it's like God was like taking all this stuff and like forcing me to deal with it. He was not, he was making in a sense he was making my crises worse to force me to wrestle with it, but at the same time giving me enough nourishment to sort of work with and to sort of because even what you're saying, what you're noticing right now, I think I realized that even at the time. I'm like, whoa, it is very clearly this guy's clear spiritual state that's causing him to reject God. It's um it's not a matter of evidence or argumentation because he apparently has all the evidence he needs.
Yeah.
Anywho,
I mean, what happens is, I mean, I think you know this already, but it's like, it's not a matter if it's not like an even debate scale. It's like there's what is, and then a lot of people, most people nowadays, the vast majority have a little cataract on their psyche. Their noose gets a little bit blinded. And I think it's very prudent when it's very appropriate when Saint Anthony the Great says to think that God turns away from a sinner is to say like the sun turns away from a blind man, because everybody who feels like that is blind. That's kind
mhm.
of the whole, ethos of it, so to speak. But yeah, no. That well, I mean, I guess the thing I like personally for you, I don't know if you've had anybody come to you with this thing of like, oh well, I don't believe in God. I'm struggling with my faith. What do you do with people that are faltering when people approach you with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I can't say like I remember too many distinct experiences where people are coming to me just like I really am not sure I can believe or anything like that. I mean, everyone comes to me was like, yeah, I have doubts, I have this and that. But honestly, like my response is the same, and this is something I also preemptively share with people. Is just that the first of all, two things. One is that the temptation to unbelief is universal, right? So we go to visit this monastery called Panagia Prusiotisa. I try to take my church there on a pilgrimage twice a year. It's a wonderful place. And when we were there in November, this is down in North Carolina, if I didn't say that, there was a bishop named Bishop Themistocles, who is a bishop in West Africa in Sierra Leone. He's an amazing man doing wonderful work among the
If you got
poorest
his
of the.
number, I'd love to interview him. So,
Let me see if I can get you that because he is somewhat of a public figure, and I think I would love to get his message out there. He's an amazing man,
actually,
um,
I'd be honored.
living saint. But anyway, he talks about his issues ministering in West Africa, and they're totally different from what we're dealing with in terms of unbelief. Like in modern American culture, the temptation is to like become an atheist, to say that there's no God, there's only material forces. In West Africa, the temptation to unbelief is basically paganism, to go back to magic and stuff like that. So
Oh my
he has
goodness, yeah.
a lot of he wrestles a lot with magic, and so he told us a story about well, first of all, I'm not going to get into like his own stories. He can tell his stories, but like situations where he's encountered magic, a very real force out there, and people even dying because of hexes or whatever that are put on them. It's really crazy. It's like a different universe. It sounds like. But he had issues with like, one of his priests he had to defrock because he was taking Holy Communion and using it for rituals or something, and
Oh
like
yeah,
mixing.
no. There was a lot of cases in and I want to say kind of the middle African countries where they were doing that same thing with icons. That's been a huge issue for the past like 10 years. Well, maybe, 10 years ago plus now, but whatever it may be.
That's very interesting, and I'd like to learn more about that. If you can share with me some stuff some other time.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, and it just made me realize it's really the temptation. We're not unique. Our temptations are yet not unique. They're just custom fit because of our culture. If you're a modern Western person, your temptation to believe unbelief is going to be towards atheism, materialism. If you're a West African, it's going to be towards magic. If you're in the Greco-Roman world, your temptation towards unbelief is going to be something more like Greco-Roman paganism or something like that. The point is the actual substance of the doubts is not what's so significant. The substance of it is that it's trying to pull you away from Christ. So that's one of the things I tell them. I say your doubts aren't as unique as you think. They're very rooted in the culture that you're a part of. It's not that you have these like because sometimes I think the way doubts present themselves is they're like this uniquely insightful piece of information. It's like you've seen through something that the church couldn't see through or that the saints couldn't see through or something. But and it's just not that at all. It's just a temptation. But number two, I say is like once you get mixed up in the Orthodox Church for like a long period of time, Um, the reality of the supernatural is really just kind of obvious. It's not. It's there things like mirror streaming icons or clairvoyant elders and stuff are it's not something you encounter every day necessarily, but it's kind of the bread and butter of our lived experience. And after a certain point, when you're just around this stuff, atheism is just not credible anymore.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I tell them. I just not to take it all that seriously, and that's in most of the world, by the way. You know, South America, Africa, India and Southeast Asia, these huge parts of the world where there's very little actual like atheism like it is in the West, because again, for them, the reality of the supernatural is much more apparent as well. So I think we kind of get our heads locked in this very small cultural box in our very limited cultural experience. That's what makes our sort of unbelief possible. So I try to help them understand that, and I think God willing, it works most of the time.
Yeah, I would say the greatest miracle of our faith is when you actually like in a way get it, but also when you feel him within you, right? Like, like the when it's because we understand that the possession of the grace of the Holy Spirit isn't stagnant, which is something that distinguishes us pretty heavily from the Protestants, but you know, I'm the farthest thing from a saint. It's a night. The one thing I have confidence about with this podcast is that I'm always the worst one on screen. So it's but you every once in a while for a number of days, weeks when you have kind of the rhythm set in and things are going well, you feel him and you feel Christo and the Holy Spirit within you, and it's so nice. It's better than whatever anybody thinks any drug is or any carnal desire, anything that this world could offer you. And you try to articulate it to people, and it's difficult because how do you tell somebody how the best thing in the world feels to be in like this place within yourself? And that's why I think that's why when people say, oh, well, the Orthodox don't evangelize, it's like, well, I mean, we can't except to tell you, hey, listen, you got to get in on this. This is the best thing in the world, right? And that's why I tell people it's like, why do you care so much? It's like go to church. You're gonna see what I'm talking about in a couple months. Just watch. Stick to the program and you're gonna love it. Um, so tell me about the life you live now and the work as a priest you do now, and what are some plans or kind of things you have set in motion for the future of your work and the parish that you minister to?
Okay. Um, where to begin? So I serve Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church in Roanoke. We're a small church. We have 75 79 families as stewards as of 2024. Although our church has been growing rather rapidly, especially with the influx of converts that I think everyone is feeling.
Hmm.
So we've done a whole bunch of baptisms and chrismations in the last year and some weddings. It's been really amazing. So I guess I would say my most immediate plan is let me finish catechize because I've only been at this church for less than 2 years. I've been here a year and a half, and it's just been we've had kind of explosive growth, to be honest. And my biggest goal is just like let me get all these people catechized. Let me because I do like to make people wait a year, and so we've just come up, completed only recently the first kind of like crop, let's say, of like 20-ish people that we've baptized. And I'd say my immediate goal is just let's keep baptizing, let's keep catechizing these people and then baptizing them and bringing them into a regular life of the Orthodox Church. And then, at that point, assess, what our growth needs are because we have all the basics. We have a church, we have a hall, we and we're stable financially. The question is going to be, what direction do we point our growth, I suppose. What do we emphasize? What do we lean into? Um,
Right.
nothing exceptionally exciting. No specific building project or unique ministry. We're just trying to, live an Orthodox life and bring more people into that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know what? I mean, I think everything you said is a bright side, but on the bright side, you got a rhythm, right? Which is which is something that a lot of the Rokor mission priests would beg for right now, from what I hear from them, where it's all just like it's a new thing all the time, and it's like, but they like living and operating within that frame of work, frame of doing things, and I'm happy that you have kind of an order of operations of things that can be done, and thank God there's something there's something to be desired within that. How do you like to run your catechisms? What do you how do you play those out?
Yeah, so I make sure everyone attends. So my basic rule is you have to be coming to church regularly for a year, and you have to complete a round of catechism within that year. Um, and I do catechism on Sundays because after liturgy, which is in some ways not necessarily ideal, but it just we in my old church when I was an assistant in Norfolk, and then when I started doing catechism here, I realized you can develop this weird situation where people are participating very actively in catechism and then not coming to church all that much, and that was
No
very weird.
kidding.
And there's not too much of that, but it was definitely happening, especially for people who are coming to the faith through marriage. So I was like, I'm going to put it on Sundays because to make it, very obvious that these two things are connected. It can't be something purely abstract, theoretical. It has to be rooted in the actual substantive life of the church. And that's been helpful. So we have very well attended catechism classes, and I just take them through a book called The Faith by Clark Carlton. I think I don't know if you've ever heard of Clark Carlton. I think he's definitely kind of underrated as an Orthodox writer and speaker. I mean, I don't know too much of what all he's up to, but at least his books are very good. Um,
I gotta take a look at it. I'm not familiar with his work, but at the parish close to me, they use the Orthodox Faith, Life, and Worship by Hieromonk Gregorios.
okay.
So that one's pretty good from what I've seen, but um. Yeah, no, that yeah, I want to explore that book you talked about because I haven't heard about that author, but I want to look into it. But
At the
you
end of
know,
the day, I can't
yeah,
imagine they're too radically different from each other.
sure,
At the end of the day, any Orthodox catechism is just going to contain certain things, and the presentation might just be a little different.
yeah, I agree. So tell me, what do you love about being a priest?
It's I it's the best job I've ever had. I mean I didn't do any other career before this. I love it because it's very dynamic. So it's definitely not an ordinary office 9 to 5, and you deal with such a range of issues. And I mean, you're with everyone from birth with you're part of every human life event from birth to death, and that is really insanely broad range of experience. You're with every sort of type and class of person that exists, and the base of knowledge, like what you have to engage with intellectually, which I really enjoy, is it really covers everything. I mean, you have to know about history, you have to know about psychology, you have to know a bit about science. You have to know obviously theology, but again, theology just on one level just incorporates everything. So the diversity of things you engage with, the dynamism of that kind of life. And it's just, I just love being an Orthodox Christian. I love our faith. I love the services. I love prayer. I mean, I don't really love prayer the way I should, but if I would, I'd be
Who
a saint.
does?
Right.
That's
But I just, I love our church and, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I definitely work days in my life, but I just love it. I love everything.
Thank God. And I remember you mentioning a little bit earlier, you commented on the rush of converts coming into the Orthodox Church, and that's been a huge topic on our program for quite a few episodes now. What do you think is spurring this, and how is your parish preparing to handle it, supposing that it doesn't fall off anytime soon?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Where did this come from? I definitely do, at least my own experiences. I think a lot of it is disillusionment with the mainstream culture, coupled with, I think a lot of people became alienated from mainstream culture during the years of COVID. I know I certainly had, some of that, for a whole variety of different reasons. There are a lot of crazy things that happened during the years like 2020 to 2022. that kind of, I think, fragmented society even more than it already was. Combine, the alienation of people from mainstream American culture with the wider availability of information related to Orthodoxy, and I think it's just natural. I think, once you know enough about Orthodoxy, the argument kind of makes itself. It's just kind of an obvious choice. So really, just making the information available and accessible, because we've never been good, and I do think it's been a failing of our church. The church. I mean, as a human institution, obviously, the church is a divine reality, is perfect. But that we never have been great at mass evangelism campaigns, at least in the modern day. There are historical reasons for that. The years of communism did a whole bunch of damage in the Turkocratia before that. But um, the internet made it very, very easy to do a whole lot of evangelism. And so once we got the message out there, I think it was a no-brainer. However, I don't. I think it definitely could come to an end. I don't think we should rest on our laurels and say, "Oh, things will always be this way," because uh, the powers that be could easily turn against us, especially after Orthodoxy gets more popular, and if the mainstream media decided to make a bunch of campaigns vilifying Orthodoxy for XYZ reason, I think that would harm us. I mean,
Oh,
harm
that's
sort
been
of.
happening already with the Russians and the Greeks, and thank God we've survived it. But
We,
yeah,
well, the church will always survive it. The gates of hell will never prevail against it. But in terms of having this massive influx of converts, I think that would change things, maybe, or would accelerate it. I don't know.
yeah. Well, I
But
think down to the essentialism of it, I think it's been pretty obvious that Kristan knows how to fight his own battles, and we're winning. Thank God. That's what it seems to be anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But in terms of just the outward situation of the church and us continuing, as of right now, certainly the faucet is turned on and is not turned off at all. It's just every week new bunch of new people. So, some stay, some don't, but enough stay that the church is growing considerably. Um, uh, and I think the way we handle it is I'm just in a fortunate situation where the old guard at my church was just very ready to receive people. I have a very friendly, welcoming um, uh, core population of the church that's mostly ethnic Greeks. And they've just been awesome. They've welcomed people, they've made friends with people, they've developed organic relationships and gotten close to the new people. So really, it was just the Holy Spirit working through the community. I can't take any credit for it, and I just happen to be in a great situation. I know other priests are not in as good of a situation. Their communities are not as ready. Unfortunately, I really can't. The only thing I can say is it needs to be that your church is ready for these people, like not just the priests, but like the whole community. And if you can finagle that, which I just stumbled into by blind luck or God's providence, but if you can't finagle that, I think you could be the best priest ever, and it won't quite work out. Or at very least, you'll end up having two parallel communities, like the core original community and then the convert community living side by side, but not mixing with each other. And that is maybe better than nothing, but it's probably a very weird situation.
Yeah.
The only problem, the only question I haven't really like figured out an adequate way to answer it is I'm getting a handful of young guys who are like, the youngest who came was like 11, interested in the Orthodox Church, and their parents are supportive and they bring them, but the parents are not necessarily interested in becoming Orthodox or learning anything at all. And I really don't know how you catechize what's basically a child still in his parents' home and his parents' non-Orthodox home. So I haven't basically what I've done in those situations. Well, the 16-year-olds, that's something I can work with. They're closer to adulthood, and I always have a conversation with the parents, make sure they're cool with it, make sure they know what the score is. But when they get younger, like 14, 13, 11, I don't know. I just I I I
I have
want
an
to.
idea.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Back to kind of something you were talking about earlier. And this is not targeted towards you, but like, when you were saying, I had a bit of this like crisis of faith and my doubts early on in your um prior to seminary. I've heard a lot of stories about a lot of just clergy and monastics in the Orthodox Church and how whether publicly or privately have just completely gone. Oh, sorry, what did you say?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, sorry about that. but have just like completely gone off the deep end, like, whether spiritually or, within their personal lives, or even mentally, emotionally, whatever it may be. And, I asked my spiritual father, I was like, as somebody approaching the priesthood, even though I have no intention on going that direction, what, how do, I told him, forgive me for sounding pharisaical, but like, how do I not turn into that? And he reminded me, he told me, do you remember that time when I was sitting on the floor of his living room? I remember. I went to go visit him, and he was explaining to me the salvific complex of what things were supposed to look like prior to the fall, and how the introduction of death created an entropy loop, and how it was all articulated by Saint Dionysius the Areopagite, and it just blew my mind, like the way he put it, and how it connects everything. And it, like, he was like, "Do you remember when you sat there and your eyes lit up, and you couldn't get enough of that stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Stick to that. Fall in love with or with the orthodoxy that keeps you committed to it, and you'll never leave, and you'll never lose Christ." And I would that sounds about right. People, I feel like a lot of people, whether they were born into the faith or, they get here and then they kind of, even out, so to speak, they start to get nominal. And it would kind of be a hard press for them to ask why, why are you still doing this, without the answer being, oh, well, it's just kind of the thing I do. Like, we need to introduce an orthodoxy to people. And I think this will work particularly well with young people because they're far more impressional and idealistic, for good reason. That's not derogatory me saying that. I think it's a good thing. Um, in the right context, that you need to make them fall in love with something worth falling in love in, instead of the things that the world tells them to fall in love with, to fall in love with, right? I think that's maybe the right angle, so to speak. And I think it works across age demographics. I would hope, at least.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Once you just fall in love with the Orthodox Church, and I don't see how you could ever drift. For my own perspective, I think just the one spin I would put on that very correct statement is just to learn to discover for yourself that it's all real. Um,
Big time.
like I like I've had the blessing, I mentioned a little, getting connected somewhat with the monasteries founded by Elder Ephraim, and having like a really holy spiritual father who's kind of plugged into that spiritual tradition, and then just learning to practice the Jesus prayer a little bit and experience a bit for yourself. And just this is just real. This is how things actually are. How could I leave? Like after a certain point, you can't unsee what you've seen. Like you can't just go back and just ditch. I don't even know how intellectually that would be possible to leave it and go. I mean, I'm not saying I could, that I'm like a perfect Christian with perfect faith. I could definitely end up, not being saved, but I don't think it would be for the reason. I think it would be for reasons other than just like leaving the church or something like that. I don't see how I could even do that at this point.
Yeah, I love my Cristo, but with the way I act, I'll be lucky if I get a broom closet in paradise. My family will get mansions. I'll get a storage room. But
Yeah.
um, so I think, okay, so maybe this will release prior to Pascha. I'm not sure, but right now we're in the season of Great Lent. Are there any ways that your parish is working to spiritually uplift the flock during the Lenten season, outside of the services and the liturgies? Kind of programs that you guys are doing to get people involved during this season of prayer, so to speak.
Sure. We don't do anything exceptionally unique. We just have, the services. I try to keep up with educating, and doing Bible study and so on and so forth. And, emphasizing the fast and confession is very important for a healthy spiritual life. We did take I told you we take a twice yearly pilgrimage to Panagiotis Monastery, um, where we were able to take like 20 some people this past time. I wasn't able to go. Unfortunately, I got really sick the night before, but I think that was really nourishing for them just to come in contact with some holy people who are able to like show them that there's this totally different life, like life not according to the world, and there's a tremendous benefit and tremendous grace in that. So that was one thing. And then the parishes of Virginia, we do a youth retreat. That'll be this upcoming weekend for the Goyans. And that's good every year, and is something I think really spiritually nourishing for the kids. So again, nothing really wild or innovative, but just keeping people engaged and involved as best we can.
Yeah, and I'm really happy you guys have those programs. Your church has a website, right?
Yeah, it's really ancient, but I have one of our parishioners is great. He's doing a total overhaul, so that'll be out soon, God willing. But
Thank God. Well, if anybody's watching this and you want to contribute to their parish and the stuff that they're doing, check out the link in the description below this video or wherever you're watching this, and you can donate to them and then learn about and explore their parish a little bit on the web. And something that kind of comes with Orthodox churches is local traditions, and specifically with Pascha, a lot of churches do things differently, whether it's, fireworks or certain little minor adjustments that are made during the liturgy. If anything at all, what does your parish usually look like during Pascha, and what makes it unique?
I saw that question and I thought it was a good question. And the honest truth is, I can't think of any particular thing we do that's, very different from, most of the other Greek Orthodox churches I've experienced Pascha in. So obviously Pascha is an exceptional and joyous event, but I can't think of any particular thing that makes us stand out. We do the resurrection service, we read the gospel outside, we have, we read the sermon of St. John Chrysostom, all wonderful moments, the candlelight. We have the feast after with the lamb. That's, all the bread and butter of GOA's churches.
Nah, actually, Pascha by itself is beautiful anyway, so that's perfectly fine, and I hope that this coming Pascha, your ministry feels enlightened by the grace of the resurrection, so it's something to look forward to. And in this season, there's a lot of, you seem to have things kind of down to a science, thank God, but there's always a lot of pressure, inside of the Lenten season and outside the Lenten season. So, as a priest in your spiritual life, what lives and teachings of the saints now kind of assist and encourage you in your work?
That's a really interesting question. And what comes immediately to mind is two things. The first, I recently picked up a book called The Prodigal Saint by Saint John of Kronstadt, which was actually an academic work. So it's not a hagiography. It's not meant to be a Lives of the Saints. It's supposed to be like a more critical academic study, a sympathetic study, but an academic study of Saint John of Kronstadt, just sort of as a man and as a figure in his time. And what's super interesting, this was Nadezhda Kizienko is the woman who wrote. I believe she's the daughter of a priest. I thought she did a very good job of going through like archival sources. What was really interesting was St. John of Kronstadt kept a diary, and we have access to that diary, right? So he published My Life in Christ, which was, I think, kind of his parts of his diary excerpted, like his spiritual musings and so on and so
Super
forth.
popular still.
Fantastic book, fantastic. But what this woman actually, she got into his diary and his letters, kind of like unfiltered, unedited, just as they existed. And I think some people didn't love this book when it came out because it portrayed, St. John as very human. In particular, it showed, he was not perfect. But actually, what I took away from that is that what we know about St. John, now that we have access to his unfiltered private thoughts, and he was uncensored in his diary. I won't say out loud, everything he talked about in his own diary, but he was very clearly not hiding anything from that. And was that he was entirely, completely sincere. His every thought, even in his like private personal diary, was devoted to Christ and how he could benefit God's church more. And his miracles were real. So he writes about his, some of the miracle, maybe not everything that's attributed to him is necessarily, but he was known as a wonder worker in his time. And in his own diary, he's writing about how the miracles surprised even him. He would just, pray for someone and suddenly they'd get well, or something like that. So I was really, really uplifted by reading this book about St. John of Kronstadt because what it shows is we could take a raw, unfiltered look of even his deepest, most intimate details of his life. And what we find when we get there is that he was the real deal. There were
Yeah.
no skeletons in his closet. There was no deep, dark secret or something. He was just every moment, every second completely devoted to Christ. And the grace of the Holy Spirit really did flow through him in ways that surprised even him. So that was really just really uplifting for me. And it just makes me want to be. I mean, gosh, even thinking about being a tenth of the priest he is incredibly daunting. But to be completely authentic and to be completely devoted in everything I do, every moment of my life, that is something I desire. I strive to be. Certainly something I very much fail at.
But it's so funny because there's a lesson in that. It's like for however human, well, I mean, he was a human, but for however human, so to speak, anybody ever is, all that a Christ really wants from you is that kind of sincerity because we understand straight from the scriptures, Christ talks about the mustard seed in the mountain, the 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 moving element, the electricity of prayer is faith. If you believe God can do it and you ask him to do it and you believe that it's within his power and hopefully within his will as you're asking for it that it can happen, that's where miracles take place. And I think people lose sight of that some of the time. It's like, why doesn't God answer my prayers? It's like, well, I mean, are you insulting him during your prayers by kind of half thinking that he can't pull it off? You know? It's like,
Yeah, it really does, and that's kind of like a hard thing for a modern person to accept, but it's just the truth. Faith, in a real sense, has to come first, and faith has to come first, and then the results, not vice versa. And there are reasons for that, but that's certainly true of Saint John of Kronstadt. I mean, he was a very, very deep believer. And the other is just being connected. I'm very impressed with and very touched by the person of Elder Ephraim, and just in that way, just by going around his monasteries or people who were his spiritual children, and just realizing what a saint we had in our midst, and being connected to sort of the living tradition in that way. He's not someone who lived 100 years ago or something like that, but he left his mark very. He passed away, I think, in 2019, and
mhm.
he and just
I
so
went to go
he
see
was
him every year. He was awesome.
really. Oh, that's fantastic. I never met him in this life, and I wished I had. But it's just I don't know. I read his book Counsels from the Holy Mountain, and it's just like I just feel the grace on the pages. It's just like this is an authentic teacher of the spiritual life. I'm really um, yeah. So Saint John of Kronstadt and Elder Ephraim have been real sources of inspiration for me, and have sources of nourishment. But really, once you start to name the saints, then I all of a sudden I pause. I'm like, well, actually, I really like Saint Porphyrios too. And then I stop and think a little bit more. As there's some more obscure saints that I also like, and it just once you start naming the saints who are really great and helpful, then the list just doesn't end. So what can you do?
Yeah, I think these more recent ones are really a huge benefit for the people now. A lot of the American saints that kind of underlie the heritage U.S. tradition. Something we're going to start reading on the podcast is the life and the works of Saint Sebastian Dabovich. That my one of the guys that works for the Orthochat just published that, and it's a really good read. But I with Yeronda, I don't think I ever really answered on this podcast what I learned from him. Every time I saw him and every time we talked, it kind of just hit me that the essence of everything that he wanted to communicate to people is obviously, stay as close to Christ as possible because he is your shield and sword in this insanity that we're in that's going crazier by the day. Um, and just his life and the way I saw him act was just representative of kind of cutting out the fat. Like there's too much noise. There's too many things that the world wants you to have going on. If we could simplify kind of, our metaphysical schedules, so to speak, we're going to have a lot less of a problem coming to Christ. Just take it easy. Stay away from, achithia and anxiety and all these things that Satan uses to penetrate our thought. That's kind of what I picked up from him. And he was right. He was always right. Just not don't be attentive to your spiritual life. Not don't fervently ask Christ to have mercy on everybody that you know and to help you. But, besides that, take it easy. There's really nothing to worry about. We won already. We just got to get to like, the celebration dinner. That's kind of the whole theme of what we got going on. So, he was good like that. He still is. But um and speaking of that, you personally, have you met any particularly saintly or who you would consider holy people in your life, and maybe tell me a little bit about the impact those people had on you?
Yeah, I do know. Some people, I don't know if I ever met anyone who was like a saint in the totally dramatic sense, or at least if they were, it was never revealed to me in that way. But I honestly, my first, serious spiritual father at seminary, who was my spiritual father the whole time at seminary, was Father George Dragus, and
Oh, he's
um,
great, isn't he? I love him.
I adore him, and I
Mm.
told you he found me when I was at that point of crisis, and he was one of the real um, influences in sort of like spiritually rehabilitating me and making me a Christian. And he had some really profound spiritual experience that he was able to share with me, and some really wonderful insights. He was a wonderful, blessed man, and I don't know if maybe the word saint would apply, but he's just a true priest and a really good, sincere, deep Christian who is responsible for my formation, and I absolutely adore him. Um, I do. I confess to one of Elder Ephraim's spiritual children, who's just. I don't want to name him on like a podcast just because
Sure,
I
yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah,
want
that's fine.
to up his spot, but he's just wonderful. Just a true priest, a true Christian, a true ascetic. That's what I've got from honestly all the spiritual children of Ephraim who I encounter, and kind of what they pass on to me is these are strugglers. These are fighters. These are people who really wrestle. They do something. They wrestle against the passions in their everyday life, which is what we need to all struggle to do. We can't just go through the motions, but we actually have to fight tooth and nail against our flesh, and just have been really has been a really wonderful influence on me. I know a lot of I know a lot of really good priests and really good Christians, and I'm just inspired by the example of all of them.
Looks to Theo. Looks to Theo. Um, and you're how deep into the priesthood? How many years have you been doing this now?
I'm coming up on my fourth anniversary in April.
Fourth anniversary. Congratulations. That's great. You made it a full presidency in the office of the Holy Priesthood. Awesome. Um, how is your appreciation for your role in the church maybe grown or shifted from the time you first started out up until this point?
Yeah, I would say just radically. It's like my perception of being an Orthodox Christian and being a priest, and basically every single thing in my life is changed very significantly since the time I was ordained. And I think in some of it's due to just personal factors, some of it's just due to life experiences like being married and having a bunch of kids. And but a lot at the end of it, I think it's all just due to the grace of God. One of the things I really realized that I didn't have as much of an appreciation for is, because we're in a very egalitarian society. We're in a society that like doesn't like hierarchy or or anything that might be interpreted,
Structure.
yeah, structure, inequality. And so I was very, very, very timid, especially starting out as a priest and being so young, about like imposing anything on it. I'm still certainly don't try to be one of those like guru type people that like runs people's lives. Absolutely not. And I don't think a good, and I'm not a spiritual father. I don't hear confessions yet. And I would never would. But I do have a very much stronger appreciation for the fact that people need to be led. You need to tell people you need to tell people what's good and what's bad, and if they respect you, they will respond to it. Actually, people like to be led. People like authorities that they can trust, and I like that in my own life. My spiritual father relationships, and my relationship with my hierarch have been very important in my own formation. So again, without being a tyrant, without being like a guru who like micromanages people, because that's very weird and bad. Um, Leadership is so important. Sheep need a shepherd, and we're all sheep. And so we leaders need to have integrity, and we need to, first of all, also be able to be willing to walk the walk. We have to, anything we're going to tell people about, we have to be ready to impose on our own lives as well. But leadership and guiding people is so important. People on one level don't know, very many people, first of all, don't even know what they want. And second of all, they don't, very many people don't know what's good for them. You need to help them in that respect as a priest and as a minister of the gospel.
I agree completely. And I think that is the most important political thing that a priest can learn in their life, to understand that people want to be guided and need to be guided without, swinging the big stick around for the sake of itself, right? It's about giving people direction. And at the end of the day, you can only lead a horse to water. I think you've seen that in this past 4 years. But at the same time, it's about gentleness through, guidance. This is what you're supposed to do, but God will give you enough heartbeats in your life to get around to sticking with the program. So, thank God for that in any case. And speaking of your wife and your children, what has being a husband and a father taught you about yourself, and how has it maybe changed your ministry?
Yeah, it's been obviously one of the most important developments in my life. So I was married for probably about a year and a half before I was ordained to the priesthood, and we just had our first child when I was ordained. Now we're up to three.
Thank God.
And that was an important thing. First of all, in growing me up, I think I was really rather immature, even when I got through seminary. I think it I just wasting my time, wasting my potential so much. I played a lot of video games and stupid and stuff like that.
Oh, I still
Um,
do.
yeah. It's that has its place, I think. But once you're an adult in the world, I think at least what I was taught and what's been true in my life is just it's not helpful anymore. Um,
You know what else is there too, though? I talked to my priest about this just because, I was curious about how people operate, why there's so little energy for people who come to church and stick to a canona and like, are dedicated to the spiritual life. And we talked about how the fathers of the church describe energies, energy itself, not, the divine energies in that context, but the energies in the context of human movement, of human doing, as a thing that it's kind of like blood, it can be spent on things, and it can, it regrows within you, but you only have so much of it at any given time, right? Like on kind of like a transcendent level. So, whatever you dedicate your time to, it's going to kind of shift the state of the source of that energy being, your soul. And that's how people kind of end up how they do, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think you put simply, you can only pay attention to one thing at a time. I can only be talking to you right now. I can't be mowing the lawn right now, and I can't be reading a book. I can do one thing at a time. And when you're consuming media, you're not spending time with your family, and you're not engaging with your work, and you're not engaging with prayer or anything productive. Again, it has its place. Like you do need to relax sometimes, but and I was immature and I needed to be grown out of a lot of bad habits in marriage, and having kids really kind of helped me like with that because it forced me just to kind of man up. Um, so that was the most important part is just, learning to the whole thing about marriage is it's just like everything in the spiritual life. It's just about destroying your egotism, learning to live not for yourself but for somebody else. First for your wife, and then for your children, and then she's learning to live for you and for her children. Um, and that was the most important thing. Was just to grow me up and mature me and give me the experience of being in charge of something, and having to take care, to be responsible for something and have, real consequences for success or failure. It's not. Uh, so that was very important. Then just yeah, I would say that and just giving me the experience, certain experiences of human life, and really a lot of the struggles and challenges that a lot of people go through, just operating on very little sleep with no free time, and a whole bunch of competing demands on your time and attention, and just learning about experiencing that struggle in order to humble me, and also being able to empathize and sympathize with people who go through that struggle. So these were all very helpful for me.
For sure, I could see that. In this time that you've been a priest, what would you consider thus far to be the most impactful or striking moment in your work?
Um, yeah, like I said, I feel that I've undergone a personal, total renaissance since my priesthood. I've changed radically. My life has changed radically. And I don't think that's like a universal thing. I don't think other people who are ordained to the priesthood necessarily have that exact same experience. It happens to be the path, the way my path went. But spiritually, I started confessing to this certain spiritual father after I'd only been a priest for a year, and he just introduced me to so many things. And opened me up to the reality of spiritual life and spiritual struggle in a way that, other previous spiritual fathers like Father George Dragas really, really, brought me along tremendously. But my current spiritual father just, I think, took me one step further and brought me into that living tradition, and have just caused me to recognize the importance of spiritual struggle, of the Jesus prayer, of, actual ascesis, and just the reality of all of it in a way that's been super, super salutary and super beneficial for my personal and spiritual life. I can't, hearing me say it now, it's just going to be cheap compared to the reality. But for me, it was an inner renaissance. It's a totally radical day night difference in my internal spiritual life. And then I had something of an intellectual renaissance as well. I discovered a Orthodox it, in concert with some other things I was reading. I discovered who I think is honestly the best Orthodox YouTuber that I think like is not one of the bigger names
Oh, thank
necessarily.
you.
um, I discovered he's an apologist named Seraphim Hamilton, and I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's really I think brilliant, and really serious about being both. Um, he comes at everything from a very traditional, very pious angle, but is also very intellectually rigorous, and he engages with things in a whole range of issues, including in the sciences, and have really shown me that the traditional classical Orthodox view of things is, first of all, the true one, and second of all, has a lot to say about the modern world. And so I was just really opened up, I think, by him, and started reading a lot and getting really into apologetics, and actually bringing that into my ministry. And the youth I minister to have just eaten it up completely. They really are hungering because, so what someone pointed out to me is, kids today, they're going on YouTube, like high schoolers, and they're watching YouTube videos about like quantum physics and stuff. Like they actually, a lot of these kids are ready for like real meat. And so if you could give them actual substance, they gobble it up. And that has totally been my experience. I started doing like an apologetics course at our Camp Good Shepherd every summer, and they love it. It's been incredibly nourishing for them. It's been great for me. So just getting serious and getting substantial intellectually has combine that with the spiritual tradition of our church, and you've got just such an awesome cocktail.
Thank God. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think I think it's kind of proven at this point that one of the primary predicators for success in young people later on in life is actually talking to them like adults and respecting them and dignifying them in a way that is relevant to their age instead of like baby talking a 13-year-old and telling him about, 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's like, they're ready for as much as they're willing to intake in a sense. So I think that I think that sounds pretty consistent. And as someone who, God willingly, has a long time to work in the priesthood, what are some things that you think you'll see change about your work and your parish in the future?
Yeah. Um, so part of my, just personal growth and development and outlook, were influenced by the fact that I spent, a good amount of time in high school and college in Russia, and I. I'm not Russian, but I've absorbed some things from that. The biggest is the interesting thing about Russians compared to like Americans or something is they don't speculate about the future at all. They don't because their whole outlook is, well, things could be great, things could be terrible. We have no way of knowing. But
Very scriptural.
they lean towards the pessimism, definitely, and that's kind of my outlook. I really don't know how things are going to be next year. I can make all these plans. I have no idea. We could continue to see this insane boom in conversions, or the powers that be could determine that they don't like Orthodoxy at all, and I don't think we'll get into a situation like the Soviet Union or something, but I do think you know, people could end up being very hostile to Orthodoxy, and things could get very hard for us. I don't know. I have no idea, and I don't know what my own parish is going to look like. So we're just going to keep going forward, trying to save our souls, and trying to bring as many people to true life in Christ as possible in that context.
You know what? I've always been a bit of an optimist. I've always been a half glass full kind of guy, and that glass has goat milk in it because that's the best thing you could drink. Um, if the good days are good and everybody likes good days, and on the days or the months or the years or however long the reign of the Antichrist is going to be, that things are bad, every time we endure through a struggle with elegance and with Christ in mind and with grace is one more crown in heaven. And the nice thing about martyrdom is that if sincere, free ticket. So, there's no reason, like I said, there's no reason to be upset about anything. We're all good. We got this. We already won. So, Pater Theodoros Efkaristopoli, thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us today. It has been an absolute pleasure. Do you have any final thoughts for the audience?
Um, I'm really convinced that what is it, the verse, seek first the kingdom of God and all these things should be added to you. I think that's just very much the truth. Desire Christ, desire to be saved, and everything else, and struggle for Christ, and struggle to be saved. And I think you'd be remarkable. You'd be really shocked by the fruit that comes out, just as an aside to that.
Precisely. Orea. Father, thank you so much. End us off with a prayer if you would, and we'll get to announcements.
Okay, sounds good. Lord, now let your servant depart in peace according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared before the face of all peoples, a light to enlighten the Gentile in the glory of thy people Israel.
Amen. Father Theodoros, thank you so much for coming on the show. If you would like to contribute to Father Theodore's parish, explore a little bit of what they do, and learn about their work, please visit the link down in the description of this video, or if you're listening audio, wherever it'll be, there'll be a way for you to find it, trust me. If you would like to contribute to the Orthochat, we have our Venmo and Cash App links down below. We are broke and would appreciate some help because we need money to do a lot of cool things that have not come out yet because we are broke. If you would like to contribute to the Orthochat and get something out of it, we have an affiliateship deal with Lore Coffee Roasters. Great coffee by an Orthodox Christian company. Use the link down below this video or around this video, wherever it is, to have 10% of your order come directly to us. If you like patristic and theological works, check out the link to the website for Scriptorium Press. If you use code Orthochat, ordering off their website, not off the Amazon, you will get 15% off of your order and 10% will go to us. Episode 5, yeah, by the time you watch this, yeah, episode 5 will be out of the Orthochat Theology, where we sit down with Archimandrite Maximus Weimar and Father Justinian Burnett to discuss the holy angels in the celestial hierarchy. That will be a continuing series. Episode 1 of the Orthochat Temple Tours, where we went down to visit St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Wheeling, West Virginia, and sat down with Father Dimitri Tsakouras to explore his ministry and his parish, is out now. Episode 2 will be releasing soon. Episode 1 of the Orthochat Passport, where we explore the life in the monastery of Agosava of Galimnos, will be out soon. Again, we're still, it might be out by the time you see this, but who knows. If it's already out, go watch it. Our sister company, our merchandise and Orthodox streetwear clothing brand Stratiatis, will be releasing soon, or it might be out by the time you see this. Please go visit it, and we got a lot of great stuff coming to you guys through that. What else are we doing? There's other stuff that I'm forgetting. We have other projects I can't even talk about. Oh, yeah, the other thing. If we do live spaces on Twitter, we do X spaces. So if you want to check those out, the link to our Twitter X, whatever people call it nowadays, is down below. We're going to continue our readings. We might be already doing them again, but the plan is, as of right now when this is being recorded, we're going to continue our readings of the life of Saint Paisios Amanathos by Harold Monk Isaac, big green book if you want to buy it off Amazon and read along. We'll be doing those readings every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. We are going to start our readings eventually on Beacon from the Bay, the collected works and life of Saint Sebastian Dabovich of Jackson and San Francisco. Please pick up that book. It's fantastic, and we'll be doing readings of that either on the YouTube or on the Twitter. I'm not sure which one we're going to do first. And besides that, brothers and sisters, Panagia Mazisu, may our Lord Jesus Christ, His all-holy Mother, all the saints, and all the angels watch over you all the days of your lives, and we will talk to you all later.
Και παρεδόθης τελείως τη ραφημία της εξαναστήσης σε κείμενο.
Kyrie Iisus Christe eleison, 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 Kyrie Iisus Christe eleison.